Hey everyone! Happy weekend! And for the people of Kalibo, happy ati-atihan na walang sadsad dahil bawal, dahil meron pa ring COVID pandemic. Boo! Oh well, ganyan talaga. Tis-tis na lang muna. So anyway, ang daming usapan sa COVID vaccines ngayon. And as usual, maraming naging biglaang vaccine experts. Ayoko na sana maki-join sa kaguluhan dahil medyo busy-busyhan din ako sa buhay ngayon. Pero ang dami na talagang misinformation na kumakalat na nagiging alarming na. Nakaka-stress na siya actually. So yun, naisipan ko na makisawsaw ng konti. Actually, mahilig talaga ako makisawsaw. Yun lang talaga yun. Normally, nagsusulat ako ng malanobelang post sa Facebook about various COVID-related scientific chismis. Kaso, tinatamad akong magsulat ngayon dahil puro na lang din ako sulat ng manuscript sa trabaho for the past 3 weeks. So, for a change, magbigla ang Zoom lecture na lang ako. O, di ba? Feeling resource speaker sa scientific conference lang ang peg. Nakakamiss din kasi mag-present sa scientific conference. Boo! Or, pwede din, parang bedtime scientific chismis na lang. Pampatulog sa mga insomniac na gaya ko na minsan hindi na alam ang difference ng araw sa gabi. Ganon. So, I will try my best to keep this chismis as simple but as comprehensive as possible para isang bagsakan na. Yung tipong pag may nagtanong sa akin about COVID vaccines, pwede ko na lang sabihin na, please refer to slide number 9 at the 11th mark. Ganon. Tamad. Hindi, mas madali lang siguro pag ganon and pwede pang balik-balikan. So, yun. Warning lang pala muna. Inherently komplikado kasi talaga ang usaping virology and immunology. So, pasensya in advance kung merong mga technical terms ako na mababanggit na hindi ko na ma-explain ng mabuti. Hindi kasi maiwasan eh. So, yun. Sorry. So, anyway, let's first talk about protective immunity and the concept of vaccination. So, typically, pag ang isang tao nagkaroon ng virus infection, meron different possible outcomes. Depende kung sino yung mananalo sa race between the virus and the host immune system. Pag ang virus ang nanalo, then most likely, death ang ending mo. Pag ang host immune system naman ang nagwagi, then makakapag-recover yung tao and usually, kasabay ng recovery na yon ang pag-develop ng tinatawag na protective immunity dahil yung adaptive arm ng ating immune system ay merong tinatawag na memory. Yung tipong yung motto niya sa buhay ay forgive but not forget. Ganon. So, next time na makita ni immune system ang same na virus, maalala niya kaagad to. So, mabilis na ang kanyang response. And therefore, mas madali na niyang matatalo si virus. Kaya, normally, either mabilis na niyang makiklear ang subsequent infection attempt or kung magkaka-infection man, hindi na ganun kagrabe ang disease symptoms. Kasi nakokontrol na ng mga memory B and T cells mo and some long-lived plasma cells ang sobrang pagdami ni virus. So, in a nutshell, yun ang tinatawag na protective immunity. Magandang example dito ang chickenpox. Di ba pag nakabulutong ka ng bata ka, kahit i-expose mo pa yung sarili mo sa isang taong may bulutong afterwards, hindi ka na mahahawaan kasi nakapag-develop ka na ng protective immunity against the chickenpox virus. So, ganun lang yon. So, paano naman papasok ang vaccination dito? Vaccination is essentially a strategy that mimics natural infection, except na instead of a live harmful pathogen, you use a harmless or a significantly attenuated or mas pinahinang version ng pathogen na yon or a component of that pathogen to trigger your immune response to eventually develop protective immunity. In other words, ang goal ng vaccination ay makapag-develop ng protective immunity ang katawan ng tao without the hassle ng pagkakasakit, without the illness. Now, there are different ways to achieve this. Kaya nga, merong iba-ibang vaccine designs and strategies. I-discuss natin ito mamaya, pero para background din, let's briefly talk about primary and booster immunization. Baka kasi nagtataka kayo bakit kailangan na 2 beses talagang magpabakuna sa COVID para kasing parang extra gastos lang. Meron pong scientific basis yan. Normally, during your first shot of vaccine, you only trigger a minimal to moderate amount of response. That is, meron siyang certain level of protection na na-induce, pero hindi siya ganun kabongga. And therefore, para ma-optimize ang induction ng adaptive immune responses, mas maganda kung meron pa talagang booster shot so that you will get a more effective protective response. Yung something better, both qualitatively and quantitatively. So if you compare, ito yung sa first shot, itong gantong level yung response na makuha mo, and normally after another shot, mas mataas na level ng immune response yung makukuha mo. Of course, I'm simplifying this. Hindi yan ganyan lang kadali. So anyway, another important point na gusto ko i-mention bago ko makalimutan ay yung common side effects after vaccination na kinatatakutan ng iba sa atin. Dahil nga merong something foreign na inintroduce sa katawan in the form of bakuna, magre-respond talaga ang immune system natin. And part of that response are the recruitment of immune cells and the inflammation. So basically, yung pain sa injection site, soreness, fever, chills, etc. na nararamdaman ng iba 24 to 72 hours after vaccination, signs po yan na na-trigger ang immune response mo. And you need this preliminary innate immune response to induce a better adaptive response, including the production of antibodies and the differentiation into memory B and T cells. Komplikado na ito masyado. Basta yung point lang is, huwag kayo agad magpapanik kung meron kayong nararamdaman after ng bakuna. Kasi yun actually yung ideal. Of course, dapat mild to moderate lang ang side effects. And dapat temporary lang. So, yun lang naman ang concept na kailangan nyo maintindihan regarding vaccination. Now, let's go to the different COVID vaccines na available ngayon sa mundo. Let's start with Sinovac. Kasi mukhang ito ang unang makakarating sa Pilipinas this February 2021. I believe around 50,000 doses ang initial na masusupply sa atin ng China. So as you all know, Sinovac has a COVID vaccine called CoronaVac, which was developed in China. Sinovac is an inactivated vaccine, which is a traditional way of producing vaccines. Bale, buong SARS-CoV-2 virus ito na pinatay by chemical treatment. Take note, pinatay, hindi pinahina. Kasi I've been hearing people saying na pinahina siya. Hindi, deads talaga dapat siya. Kung na-prepare to ng maayos, it should be dead. And then, so it's basically the dead version of the SARS-CoV-2 virus, whole virus, plus dinagdagan ng alum as an adjuvant para mas ma-boost ang potency ng killed virus as a vaccine. Now, maraming usap-usapan ngayon regarding its efficacy. Kasi nga, medyo magulo din ang naging press release nila kahapon ba yun or the other day. So disclaimer lang, hindi ko nakita mismo yung actual data. So these info here are just based on news articles na medyo reliable naman. Based on interim phase 3 data, they reported that their vaccine can protect 78 of their trial participants from developing mild to severe COVID disease. But if they include the very mild cases, 50.4 lang ang protection. Take note, yung endpoint ng most, if not all, COVID vaccine phase 3 trials are symptoms. So disease outcome. Hindi yung mismong infection, which can be asymptomatic or symptomatic. Just they were just measuring protection from symptomatic COVID. And these symptoms are generally classified as mild, moderate, and severe. Sa case ng Sinovac, meron pa silang very mild. And I guess this is partly because the trial participants were healthcare workers. So this was done in Brazil. And therefore, I guess mas observant yung mga healthcare workers sa mga symptoms than the general public. Also, if you think about it, since these groups have higher exposures to SARS-CoV-2 dahil sa trabaho nila sa hospitals, any protection that you get is actually quite significant and perhaps should be, should be given some extra weight. Because if you think about it, kung yung bakuna mo merong 50% protection among nurses sa COVID hospitals, mas nakakabilib yun, di ba? Kesa 50% protection among people na ang only major exposure lang nila ay ang pagpunta sa grocery shops. Another data that should be highlighted here is the 100% protection against moderate to severe COVID cases. And why is this important for Pinoys? Kasi ang pagpapabakuna with Sinovac could mean protection not just from death, but also from hospital bills, basically. Kasi di ba, pag meron kang moderate to severe COVID infection, ilalagay ka nila sa hospital. And this is quite significant, especially since mahal magpa-hospital ng COVID sa Pilipinas. So makasurvive ka man, baka baon ka naman sa utang. And therefore, kung merong protection against moderate to severe cases of COVID, like the case ng Sinovac na 100% kaya nilang protektahan against moderate to severe cases, yung nabakunahan, then that's quite good. The point here is Sinovac may not be the best COVID vaccine in terms of efficacy, but it still induces significant protection. So I hope wag tayo maging masyadong judgmental. Usual vaccine efficacy cutoff for FDA approval is actually 50%. Depende kung paano nyo gustong basahin ang data ng Sinovac, it is still above the cutoff. So, in a way, good news pa rin yun. So, when it comes naman sa storage and transport, medyo convenient siya kasi refrigerated temperature lang ang requirement ni Sinovac. Now, let's go to the cost. Isa pa to sa medyo contentious issue ni Sinovac vaccine. Apparently, yung listahan ng ibang Pinoy politician, 2 doses of Sinovac can be up to 3,600 pesos for the 2 doses. In short, medyo mga around 1,800 pesos per shot. Kaya medyo nagwawala ang iba kasi bandang I think 650 to 700 pesos per shot lang ang singil ng Sinovac sa India and Indonesia. So, mukhang overpriced nga naman ang sa Pinas. According to an interview that I saw recently, under negotiation pa ang final price ng Sinovac sa Pinas. Hopefully, galingan ng Pinas government ang negotiation nila with the company. But until we get that info, I hope wag naman munang mag-jump into conclusions yung karamihan sa atin. As far as I know kasi, $60 din ang singil ng Chinese government sa mga citizens nila when this Sinovac, this CoronaVac was made available sa general public sometime in October 2020 for emergency use. So I would assume na around 1,500 naman talaga ang market price ng vaccine. But I guess you can still negotiate that price. Pero syempre malamang merong kapalit yun. I guess parang quid pro quo, kumbaga. Tama ba? Yeah. But that's the reality. You should remember that Indonesia was part of their phase 3 trial. So meron silang discount malamang for agreeing to be guinea pigs. And by the way, not all the time bad ang maging guinea pig sa mga ganitong trials as long as aware ka sa risks. India also has a large-scale manufacturing facilities. So perhaps they will be tapped by Sinovac to do some of the large-scale vaccine production. Kaya siguro medyo discounted din yung bigay sa kanila nung vaccine. Now, I guess kung ganda lang ang puhunan ng Pinas, then matuwa tayo if we can get the vaccine for as low as 1,500 for the 2 doses. Kasi ibig sabihin ng grabing negotiation kung walang kapalit. Gets? Now, let's go to Novavax, which is a vaccine developed in the US. So, if you recall, buong SARS-CoV-2 virus na patay ang ginawang antigen sa Sinovac. For Novavax, they will just use the viral spike glycoprotein as the antigen. So as you can see in this cartoon, yung SARS-CoV-2 is studded with this spike glycoproteins, yung mga yellow na to na nakikita mo. And these spike proteins are used by the virus to enter the cells. And since these spike proteins are exposed on the virus surface, it makes them an ideal vaccine target. So for this subunit vaccine, ipuproduce nila yung viral spike glycoprotein sa lab, and then i-deliver nila to via nanoparticles together with some adjuvant, a patented matrix M, which I don't know what that is. Pero adjuvant din siya, just like yung alum na adjuvant sa Sinovac before, para basically pampadagdag ng immunogenicity. As with Sinovac, convenient ang storage and transport ng Novavax kasi under refrigerated temperature lang for up to 2 months. And it can even be stored at room temperature for up to 24 hours. So this is quite important kasi hindi mas madaling mapanis yung vaccine. And it is also quite cheap at $16 or about, I guess, 750 pesos per shot. Ang catch, though, is kakaumpisa pa lang ng phase 3 trial nito noong late December 2020, around December 28, December 13, hindi ko maalala. So, hindi pa actually alam kung gaano ito ka-effective as a vaccine. Endpoint nila for this is protection from moderate to severe COVID-19. So if you compare this with Sinovac na merong 100% protection against moderate to severe COVID disease, the efficacy data that you would get from Novavax will never be better than Sinovac kasi wala namang tataas sa 100%, di ba? But of course, it would be nice kung, I guess, pati protection from infection as measured as positive SARS-CoV-2 via PCR, yung kukunin din ng Novavax as another endpoint. But I don't think it will be included. So at best, yung makukuha lang natin is protection against moderate to severe disease, COVID disease. And this is for Sinovac. If you compare this with Sinovac, 100% naman yung Sinovac. So I hope klaro yan. Just so you can appreciate the vaccines better. Kung ano yung maganda, ano yung differences. Ganyan. Now, AstraZeneca. So AstraZeneca is the one from the UK. This was developed in collaboration with the University of Oxford, and this is being sold at cost, walang profit. And that is why this is currently the cheapest COVID-19 vaccine, the cheapest COVID-19 vaccine with emergency use approval, around, I think, $3 to $4 lang per shot. So how much is that? Basta hindi lalagpas ng 1,000 pesos for the 2 doses. So as with the Novavax, yung viral spike glycoprotein pa rin yung target ng vaccine, but this antigen is being delivered via another virus, yung adenovirus na to. This is a chimp adenovirus actually, as the viral vector. So adenoviruses are common. They are common viruses that typically cause colds or flu-like symptoms, but in AstraZeneca's case, they used a modified chimp adenovirus. So adenovirus siya ng chimpanzee. So bali yung gene na nai-encode ng SARS-CoV-2 spike glycoprotein was added to the adenovirus genome. The adenovirus vector can enter the cells. So it can infect the cells, but it cannot replicate. It can enter the cells, but it cannot replicate inside the cells. Then hindi pala makikita. But anyway, so basically this inserted SARS-CoV-2 spike protein is then transcribed into mRNA and are translated by the infected cells and are subsequently expressed on the cell surface for recognition by immune cells. While some of the spike protein fragments can also be presented into antigen-presenting cells. Again, nagiging technical na naman ako. Hindi ko alam kung ano yung kailangan dito na importante. Pero since yung viral glycoprotein is encoded within the adenovirus double-stranded DNA genome, hindi siya kasing fragile as an RNA, like yung sa mRNA vaccine na pag-uusapan natin later. Plus, dahil sa tough na protein coat ng adenovirus, essentially protects the genetic material inside. So as a result, yung AstraZeneca vaccine doesn't really have to stay frozen, unlike the mRNA vaccines. And this is expected to stay expected to last for at least 6 months when refrigerated. As for the phase 3 trial results naman, AstraZeneca claimed an average efficiency of 70%, average efficacy of 70% on the average, and the data was actually published sometime in early December sa Lancet. And this average efficacy of 70% is actually a bit controversial. Ang nangyari kasi, I think merong pumalpak sa pag-compute ng dose ng vaccine. So instead na full dose, or standard dose, ang vaccine scheme ng trial, merong iba na half dose or low dose, standard dose ang nakuha. So dun sa planned standard dose, yung efficacy na nakuha nila is 62% protection against symptomatic COVID, while dun sa low dose, standard dose na regimen, actually mas mataas, 90% yung protection. With the caveat that the participants dun sa low dose, standard dose na cohort they were all younger than 55 years old. So basically, this dose was not tested against the elderly population. So yun yung medyo weakness ng study na to, bukod sa pumalpak, of course, yung pag-compute nila ng dosage. But one interesting data that they actually showed is the apparent 58.9% protection of the vaccine sa low dose, standard dose na regimen against asymptomatic infection. Take note, this is a symptomatic infection. AstraZeneca lang yung nag-measure nito. As far as I know, sila lang yung meron data. And 58.9% protection is quite significant. Although sa standard dose, nasa 3.8% protection lang yung nakuha. Pero yun na nga, meaning lang nito is that if the vaccine can protect against asymptomatic infection, hindi lang COVID disease ang potentially kaya niyang i-prevent, but the further transmission of the virus as well. Pero dahil nga palpak ang dosing, for further investigation pa to. Nevertheless, this is promising. And just to be clear, yung kapalpakan sa dosage na nangyari will likely only affect the efficacy. But the safety profile ng AstraZeneca will remain the same. So hindi natin kailangang magpanic na dahil pumalpak sa dosage, yung efficacy lang most likely yung maapektuhan nun. Wala yung pinalaman sa safety ng vaccine. Kung ano man yung nakuha nila sa palpaking dosage, malamang more or less ganun pa rin yung safety niya, at least yung short-term safety ng AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, let's go to the Sputnik vaccine from Russia's Gamaleya. The vaccine design is actually quite similar to that of AstraZeneca kasi gumamit din sila ng adenovirus as vector for delivery. But instead of using one chimpanzee adenovirus, gumamit si Gamaleya ng two human adenovirus as vectors, hoping that this two-vector vaccine strategy will result to a stronger and a longer-term immune response as compared to vaccines using only one and the same vector for 2 doses. And true enough, efficacy from the interim data was 91.4% against symptomatic COVID, sorry. So 91.4% against symptomatic COVID with 100% protection if only protection from severe cases is measured. So para rin to yung sa Sinovac na 100% protection from, oh no, this is just severe cases. I don't know if the 100% is also true for moderate. Hindi clear dun sa press release nila. But the main issue of some experts sa Gamaleya vaccine, sa Sputnik 5 vaccine, is that details of these data are not readily available for review. So you really have to take the company's word based on their press release. But this does not necessarily mean na kailangan na silang pagdudahan. Ayaw lang siguro nilang makipag-share ng data. Sa mundo. Ayaw nilang mag-share ng data sa mundo. Siguro. But again, this is also, again, storage is quite convenient, refrigerated temperature, and it can even be transported in lyophilized form. So, pwede siyang dry at fridge temperature. And also, medyo mura din siya at less than $10 per shot. Yan yung estimate nila. Then finally, we go to the most popular COVID vaccines, yung dream ng lahat for some reason. I guess I do understand why it's the ideal vaccine. Pero yun lang. So this is the most popular vaccines, the modified mRNA vaccines from Pfizer and BioNTech, which is now commercially called Comirnaty. I don't know how you pronounce this. And the other one from Moderna. So how are these mRNA vaccines produced? Basically, mRNA encoding the target is still the viral spike glycoprotein. So this mRNA encoding this spike glycoprotein are produced in vitro, are produced by in vitro transcription or by chemical synthesis with certain modification to make the mRNA more stable and in a way slightly less immunogenic to avoid hypertoxicity. These mRNAs are then encapsulated into lipid nanoparticles and are then ready for vaccination use. Hindi ko actually alam kung kailangan ko talagang i-explain yung mga different vaccine designs. Yung gusto ko lang ipakita dito, gusto ko lang ma-appreciate ninyo na iba-ibang vaccines to, hindi to pare-pareho, iba-ibang design, and therefore meron silang advantages and disadvantages based on their design na kailangan ninyong maintindihan para hindi yung tipong parang masyado tayong demanding minsan na gusto ko ganitong vaccine. It's not that simple. Yun lang. So anyway, since very similar naman yung vaccine design ng Pfizer, BioNTech, and no Moderna, I just made one slide for both. Basically, in terms of efficacy, comparable naman yung two mRNA vaccines at about 95% protection, which is quite high. And this is against symptomatic COVID. And because mRNAs are generally fragile and easily degraded, they have to be transported and stored at ultra-low temperature. For Pfizer, BioNTech, kailangan nila -70 degrees Celsius. So, kailangan siyang i-transport in temperature-controlled thermal shippers with dry ice. Kailangan lagi siya naka-dry ice. Meaning, medyo hindi ito practical na choice sa ating mga kabundukan na merong tropical climate. Baka kasi sirang mRNA vaccine na lang ang makaabot sa rural areas. And once degraded na kasi ang mRNA vaccines, wala nang kwenta to. So that's something that you really have to appreciate and understand. Relatively better naman yung temperature requirement for Moderna at minus 20 degrees Celsius. So, pwede na yung regular freezer for up to 6 months. And just recently, Moderna claimed that their modified mRNA vaccine can actually remain stable for up to 30 days at refrigerated temperature and can even survive room temperature condition for up to 12 hours. So, okay to. I mean, this is quite nice. As for the cost, though, Moderna seemed to be the most expensive of all the emergency use approved COVID vaccines. Pfizer is at USD $33 per shot, so almost 1,500 pesos per shot, so mga 3,000 pesos for the 2 shots. Well, I guess kung maniniwala kayo dun sa presyo na 3,600 ng Sinovac, so that makes Sinovac the most expensive one, but I'm not sure if that's true though. As for Pfizer, mas mura siya. It's about 1,000 pesos per shot. So not bad actually kung meron lang tayong access sa biofreezers. So this is just a summary highlighting the advantages and disadvantages of existing COVID vaccines that will be likely used in Pinas. So in a perfect world with unlimited resources, I would say that Moderna would be my vaccine of choice because of its high protection and better storage requirement compared to Pfizer. But the problem is Moderna is a relatively small company. So I think it was just established sometime in 2010. So its production is also quite limited. Especially since marami na ring naunang nag-pre-order kay Moderna. So, kung not so alta na country ka with more than 100 million population, Moderna may not be a practical choice kahit yun talaga yung gusto mo. Pfizer comes second in my current ranking because of its high efficacy. But logistics naman yung major problem for this vaccine. Kasi paano mo siya i-distribute sa ating mga kabundukan, especially since tropical climate tayo. Perhaps this vaccine is more suited to major cities of the country na merong direct international flight or merong biofreezers for storing the vaccine. I guess for our key leaders belonging to the vulnerable group, I would probably suggest taking the mRNA vaccines, either the Moderna or the Pfizer, because of their high efficacy and yun. Then I would go for AstraZeneca, especially for the bulk of our healthy adult population, mainly because it is the cheapest. And unlike the other vaccines, it actually has data on protection against asymptomatic infection. Of course, yung current efficacy data is still subject to further investigation due to the dosage error in their phase 3 trials. But I think given na at worst protection is at 62%, that is still better than nothing. I mean, you really have to appreciate this. 62% is better than 0%. Then next, I would go for Gamaleya because of its quote-unquote high efficacy. I would probably rank this higher kung mas transparent lang sila sa data. So that's my only reservation. Otherwise, this is a very promising vaccine. Some experts are also claiming that the use of this AD5 as vector for the Gamaleya vaccine could increase the vaccinee's risk for HIV infection. But I guess if you do not administer the vaccine to HIV high-risk groups, then it won't really be a major issue. But note that these are just potential risks na currently hindi pa nga rin talaga ma-explain ng science. But just to be on the safe side, if I were the people responsible for vaccinating Pinoys, kailangan ko maging careful sa pagtuturok ng vaccine na to and make sure na hindi ko tuturukan yung mga taong merong propensity for, higher risk for HIV infection. Kasi mas patataasin pa niya. Mas mai-infect siya lalo. Hindi pala. I have to be very careful. Yan ang prediction nila based on some data from another vaccine. But this hasn't been proven really for the Gamaleya. So lahat na to ay mainly assumption lang. And just to stay on the safe side, kailangan nating isa-isip lang to. Interesting side note, AstraZeneca and Gamaleya actually started the collaboration sometime in December. And currently, they are testing the efficacy of combining the two adenovirus vector COVID vaccines. So ang plan nila is to administer Gamaleya's AD26 vaccine as the first dose, and then yung AstraZeneca's chimp adenovirus vector vaccine as the booster shot. The hope is that by doing this combo, Astra's efficacy will be increased by using the two vector scheme, and at the same time, Gamaleya's potential HIV risk by using the AD5 vector will be eliminated as the AD5 vector won't be used anymore. So yes, fingers crossed. Because if this works, then this combo may be the ideal vaccine for developing countries like Pinas. Kasi nga mura and hopefully highly protective. I placed Sinovac at the bottom, well, close to the bottom, not because I don't believe in this vaccine. I actually think any of the available vaccines now are good enough. Again, 50% protection is better than nothing, right? Also, eto lang yung vaccine company na willing magbigay sa atin ng 50,000 doses by February 2021. And hindi na natin kailangang mag-inarte masyado. Pwede na siguro yun for, I guess, vaccinating our healthy healthcare workers. I just hope na makapag-negotiate tayo ng maayos na price. Yung tipong closer to the Indonesia and India rate naman. Tentatively, Novavax is last on this list only because ongoing pa yung phase 3 trial nito. But if efficacy is 70% or better, I would probably place this after the mRNA vaccines. But at this point, since anything is possible pa, pwedeng hindi siya gumana, hindi siya protective enough, ilalagay ko muna siya dito sa hulihan. But again, fingers crossed na gumana siya ng bongga. So, what are the COVID vaccines that, what are the COVID vaccines that Pinas government plans to order? I am not sure kung gaano ka-reliable ang news na to from CNN earlier this week. But it seems like we are getting Pfizer, Novavax, AstraZeneca, Sinovac, and Gamaleya. So far, emergency use of Pfizer has been approved by the Philippine FDA yesterday or kagabi, hindi ko na maalala. And AstraZeneca and Sinovac have pending FDA applications sa Pilipinas. Yung Gamaleya and yung Novavax, wala pa silang FDA application. Hindi ko alam kung ano yung reason ng Gamaleya. Pero of course, yung Novavax, hindi pa talaga sila pwedeng mag-apply ng FDA emergency use FDA approval kasi wala pa silang phase 3 trial. What they can do maybe just so para mapabilis yung paggamit or pag-administer ng Novavax, hindi ko na maalala, yung Novavax vaccine sa Pilipinas is kung gawin tayong trial participants. In short, kailangan nating mag-volunteer as guinea pigs. So that's a risk na I think it's a good risk, but I don't know how people, medyo meron kasing fear yung mga tao sa vaccination sa Pilipinas. And I guess that's from a recent experience with another vaccine. And I cannot really blame them. Pero, yun lang. I hope na medyo pag-isipan din nating mabuti. Kasi kung normally, if you are part of the trial participants, mas mauuna kang mabibigyan ng bakuna and normally manenegotiate mo yung presyo. Kasi nga, kailangan ka nila, di ba? Kailangan nila yung data mo. So kung kaya nating manegotiate yon at merong mga matatapang na volunteers na willing magpa-vaccinate, then we can get this probably earlier. But I don't know if Novavax applied for clinical trials sa Pilipinas. I think kasi alam ko yung Sinovac and yung AstraZeneca nag-apply before. AstraZeneca withdrew their application sa clinical trial kasi meron na silang enough data from other areas. Hindi ko alam yung sa Sinovac and sa Novavax. And I think even Gamaleya, hindi ko na ma-keep track kasi ang daming mga plano and I don't know kung ano talaga yung nangyari. So anyway, marami akong naririnig na disappointed Pinoys regarding the government's choice of vaccine. But really, we have to be realistic sa mga goals at ambisyon natin sa buhay, people. The decision on what vaccine to purchase will not depend solely on efficacy. Kasi nga, hindi perfect yung mundo. We have to consider availability, practicality, or convenience ng transport especially and storage, and yung cost. In terms of availability, so far, mukhang Sinovac lang talaga ang sure na makakarating by February 2021 sa Pilipinas. And even that, it's only 50,000 doses of vaccine. So it can be administered to 25,000 Pinoys. So this will be given to, I guess, priority groups. And I believe Pfizer will be, the Pfizer vaccines will be shipped soon. Hindi ko lang alam kung kailan, but sabi nila soon, so soon is relative, so I don't know. But anyway, if you look at the graph right here, The blue bars are the estimated capacity of the different vaccine companies. And yung solid na orange bar are the pre-ordered vaccines by various countries as early as June 2020, with the striped orange bar representing potential expansion dun sa order nila. This was prepared in November 2020, so hindi siya talaga updated graph, but they should at least give you some idea kung gaano kahirap makakuha ng vaccine sa mundo ngayon. Kasi lahat nakapila, lahat gusto mauna. Gets? Basically, based on this graph, more than 10 billion doses of the promising COVID vaccines have already been pre-ordered. AstraZeneca na pinakamura, yung merong pinakamaraming order actually. And mukhang if you look at the bars, mukhang mas marami pa ang pre-order kaysa sa capacity ng AstraZeneca na mag-produce ng vaccine for 2021. So, yung capacity niya is around 3 billion. Yung order na meron na sa AstraZeneca sa pila, lagpas na ng 3 billion. So, yun yun. Yung second na may pinakamaraming order is yung Novavax. Pero yun nga, nasa phase 3 trial pa lang to. Pfizer has some room for new orders, I guess. If you just base it from this graph. But I don't know if this is still true considering na Pfizer ang pinakaunang na-approve na COVID vaccine for emergency use. Kasi malamang nung na-approve sila for emergency use, maraming mayayamang country yung umorder na sa kanila. Hindi naman not necessarily mayayamang country, pwede ring super friends ng countries na nag-develop ng vaccine, which is basically Germany and the US. Yun. So, anyway, the point here is as long as yung efficacy ng vaccine is above the FDA's threshold of 50%, availability talaga ang isa sa major determining factor ng pagpili ng bibilhin nating bakuna or i-order nating bakuna. Otherwise, aabutin tayong naka-home quarantine hanggang 2022 kung mag-aantay tayo sa ideal vaccine natin. Especially kung ang ideal vaccine natin is actually not suitable to our situation, facility-wise and temperature-wise, and I'm talking about the mRNA vaccines here na pangarap ng lahat, which is the practicality aspect sa mga desisyones natin sa pag-order ng vaccine. Then you also have to consider the cost. Ideally, we would like to get the cheapest rate possible. But then again, time is also of the essence. Dahil nga urgent ang lahat due to this pandemic situation, kailangan talaga i-balance ang mga bagay-bagay and learn to be flexible. Kasi survival of the fittest na ang magiging labanan nito, especially with SARS-CoV-2 continuously mutating into who knows what. So yes, medyo kailangan nating iayon ang expectations natin sa ganda. And I am not talking about gandang Miss Universe here, unfortunately. Kasi kung yun lang yung labanan, baka manalo tayo. But no, that is not the labanan. Now, let's quickly address safety concerns. Mahabang usapin to actually, pero try ko lang din pasimplehin. Important to remember, hindi ang COVID vaccine ang unang bakuna na ituturok sa katawan ninyo kung sakali. Kasi bata pa lang tayo, nabakunahan na tayo against mumps, measles, rubella, probably TB, iba-iba pa. Basta, marami na. Kung nagpapabakuna kayo sa inyong local health centers before, that is. Yung difference na ngayon, dahil nga sa urgency ng situation, kailangan nating mag-take ng calculated risks and umpisahan yung pag-administer ng bakuna for emergency use. Kahit interim phase 3 data pa lang ang available. Ideally kasi, papatapusin muna ang long-term efficacy and safety data ng phase 3 trials, usually for about 1 to 2 years bago mag-start ang mass vaccination. But this is not the case here. Ibang sitwasyon ito. Pero dahil nga sa sitwasyong malapit na tayong mag 1 year na nakikipagtaguan kay ating COVID, at marami ng businesses ang nalulugi, we need to take calculated risks. But what do we know so far? In terms of short-term efficacy, in terms of short-term safety, medyo meron naman tayong sagot doon based on the interim trial data. So far, all of the vaccines with interim results are safe in the sense na majority of reported adverse effects were mild and moderate, including pain at the injection site, soreness, fever, fatigue, chills, mga ganyan. There were also cases of severe side effects reported, but those were very, very rare, less than 100% of the trial participants. And the effects were also temporary. So important to remember that. Konti lang yung merong severe side effects and normally temporary lang ang lahat. And so far, no serious and permanent side effects pa ang nare-report. Like yung Bell's palsy na naririnig natin sa news, those were temporary. There were also a few deaths reported to be associated with the vaccination, pero the link to the vaccination has not yet been established. So those can just be due to coincidence and under investigation pa tong lahat. Pero again, pwedeng coincidence siya, pwedeng some rare side effect na hindi naman nangyayari sa karamihan sa nabakunahan. So some with allergy, for example, some with allergy to some components of the vaccine, like say the alum from Sinovac's inactivated vaccine, or maybe merong hyperreaction sa mRNA vaccines ng Pfizer and Moderna, they can manifest severe side effects. But please remember that these are special cases. Now, when it comes to long-term safety and efficacy, unfortunately, wala pa talaga tayong information kasi bandang July 2020 pa lang naman naumpisahan yung phase 3 trials. But one of the main concern of Pinoys is the possibility na magkaroon din ng antibody-dependent enhancement or ADE ang SARS-CoV-2 infection following vaccination. ADE is a common phenomenon in dengue virus infection. So, I guess try kong i-explain to in the simplest way possible para lang medyo maintindihan, ma-appreciate nyo kung ano yung point. So, during a typical dengue virus infection, etong to, the virus would bind to a receptor. So say this is the cell surface. A dengue virus would bind to a receptor on the cell surface that would facilitate its entry into the cell to initiate rounds of replication, leading to eventually production of progeny virions. Basta, papasok siya sa cells, mag-i-infect siya, and magpaparami siya doon. Yun lang yung point. Ito yung normal, typical course ng dengue virus infection. Now, if neutralizing antibodies are produced, say following a previous dengue virus infection or following dengue vaccination, these neutralizing antibodies, yung mga green na nakikita niyo dito, these neutralizing antibodies are able to bind to the virus and prevent it from further binding to the cell surface receptor. So dito makita mo, ito yung virus na walang neutralizing antibody, makakabit lang siya sa receptor, makakapasok na siya. Ngayon, kung yung virus, yung dengue virus, kung yung host na na-infect ng dengue virus ay meron ng existing neutralizing antibodies from a previous infection or from a previous vaccination, then kung neutralizing yung antibodies na yon, titikitan niya yung virus, and by binding, hindi na pwedeng mag-bind yung virus sa cell receptor. So wala nang infection na mangyayari. Now, sa case naman ng ADE, merong napoproduce na antibodies yung host against the dengue virus, but these are non-neutralizing antibodies. And these non-neutralizing antibodies during infection or vaccination, while they are capable of binding to the virus, hindi niya kayang i-block yung pag-bind ng virus sa cell surface. Instead, technical na naman to. Instead, yung merong Fc gamma kasi yung antibodies, and this Fc gamma portion ng antibody can bind to Fc gamma receptors sa certain cell surfaces, such as sa macrophages na gustong i-infect ng dengue virus. So, what happens is that yung pag-bind ng non-neutralizing antibody sa dengue virus would actually facilitate the binding of this antibody to the Fc gamma receptor ng cell surface, and this helps the virus bind to the cell surface better. So mas makakapag-infect siya efficiently thanks to the non-neutralizing antibodies na na-produce ng host against a previous infection or a previous vaccination. So, in this case, instead na mag-block ng infection yung antibodies, tumulong pa ito basically para maging mas mapadali ang pag-infect ng dengue virus sa cells. Now, as I have said, this ADE phenomenon is known sa dengue virus research way before nagkabakunahan sa Dengvaxia. So, basically, kung alam mo ang mechanisms ng pathogenesis ng virus mo, you could actually have some idea kung gaano ka-risky ang pagbabakuna. And this is why ang first question ng isang virologist every time makakarinig siya ng vaccine na na-develop against dengue virus is, meron bang na-observe na possible ADE sa phase 2 trial? And this risk is quite high that walang basta-bastang mag-a-approve ng mass vaccination against dengue nang hindi nasisigurado yung possibility for ADE. Because based on your knowledge of the virus and its pathogenesis, you know that risk is just too high. Kung alam mo yung dengue virus, alam mong malaki yung risk ngayon. So hindi mo talaga gagawin yung mass vaccination. Hindi to, and this is not necessarily true for COVID. So, pagdating sa COVID, so far, wala pa namang nare-report na ADE sa SARS-CoV-2. Although I should say na ADE has been reported for the kamag-anak SARS and MERS viruses. So yes, in a way, there is still a risk, but given the current pandemic situation, is it a risk worth taking? I guess so, especially kung vulnerable group ka. Because what else is your choice? Forever quarantine para mapagtaguan si ating COVID? Good luck sa exciting na buhay na lang kung ganon. Now, let's talk about the concept of herd immunity. Herd immunity is a form of indirect protection from an infectious disease that occurs when a sufficient percentage of a population has become immune to an infection, whether through vaccination or previous infection, thereby reducing the likelihood of infection for individuals who lack immunity or are naive. So this cartoon explains this concept quite well. So in a population where everyone is naive in blue, that is, wala pang exposure sa specific pathogen of interest, mas madaling magkahawaan once meron isa na nagka-virus infection in maroon. Kasi kaliwat kanan ang pwedeng maging transmission. This is like, I mean, imagine niyo nung umpisa ng COVID pandemic. Lahat tayo naive, 'di ba? So anywhere, kahit ano, basta magkaroon ng sufficient contact, mas madaling magkahawaan kasi lahat pwedeng mahawa, essentially. But once the population achieves herd immunity, as indicated by the immune individuals in green here, mas mahihirapan ng kumalat ang virus infection kasi wala na siyang masyadong mapapasahan. Therefore, kahit yung mga individuals na hindi naman talaga immune, like yung mga blue dito, kahit hindi naman sila immune, less na yung chance na makakakuha sila ng infection dahil konti na lang yung taong mapapasahan ng infected individuals. So, it's illustrated here. So, ito yung infected individual. Pwede pa niyang pasahan yung isa, pero since napaligiran na yung ibang naka-blue, hindi na niya mapapasahan kasi nga mas marami ng green na pag halimbawa, yung green, yung red, papasahan niya yung red, etong another red, di ba? Papasahan niya, try niyang papasahan yung green, but these green individuals are immune, so hindi siya magkakasakit and hopefully hindi siya magkaka-infection. So, hindi siya makakarating dun sa yung infection dun sa mga taong hindi pa naman talaga immune dahil sa herd immunity na tinatawag. For COVID, it was estimated that around 60 to 70% of the population should be immune via previous infection or via vaccination in order to achieve this so-called herd immunity. One important detail though, since our clinical trials measured disease outcome as endpoint, except for the limited data that we have from AstraZeneca, we don't really know if many of these vaccines could protect individuals from asymptomatic infection. But I guess if severity of symptoms is proportional to viral load, which is not always the case, by the way, then I guess it is reasonable to assume that once you are vaccinated, there is likely less chance for you to shed the virus and infect other people. But again, that's just an assumption, considering we don't really have actual data. Which brings us to our important question. Should you vaccinate yourself or not against COVID-19? Basically, it's a choice between some unknown potential safety risks versus death, or maybe a severe case of COVID infection for the vulnerable groups. Isipin nyo na lang, huwag nyo na lang isipin yung death, or huwag nyo isipin yung herd immunity. Isipin nyo na lang, kahit hindi ka mamamatay against COVID kung vulnerable group ka, the fact na pwede kang ma-ospital, nakaka-stress na yun, diba? Kasi pwede kang mabaon sa utang sa ospital due to COVID. And that is, I think, reason enough to exert some effort to get protection and to get it better, ideally from vaccination. For healthy individuals naman with high-risk jobs such as our healthcare workers and other frontliners, not vaccinating could mean potentially spreading SARS-CoV-2 to their vulnerable patients in the hospitals, which could lead to their death. So, makukonsensya ka pa. So, and also, if significant number of these healthcare workers get sick simultaneously and have to be quarantined, then it could lead to the collapse of the healthcare system kasi ma-overwhelm na yung sistema, like what happened in Wuhan and Italy early during the pandemic. And even for healthy adults, not vaccinating could lead to the spreading of the virus to your vulnerable loved ones, especially when you are staying in the same household. So, I am not saying this to convince or discourage anyone to get vaccinated. Gusto ko lang i-remind ng lahat sa realidad ng sitwasyon, which I hope would help you make the choice. Now, I guess if you decide not to get vaccinated, that's fine too. But remember, herd immunity cannot be achieved kung lagpas sa 30% ng population ay pasaway. So, really kailangan magtulungan lahat. And maybe kung pasaway ka talaga, it's best kung sama-sama na lang lahat ng pasaway muna at mga ayaw magpabakuna sa isang remote island para doon na lang sila maglaro ng matiraang matibay. Who knows, baka naman sila naman yung maging sole survivor, I don't know. So, wagi pa rin, I guess. But anyway, last slide na pala to. So anyway, I hope na makapagmuni-muni kayo ng mabuti and makapag-decide on what's best for you and or your community. So, good luck people and ingat lagi. Sayang walang ati-atihan this year. Boo! Bye!